Welcome to CTO Insights, where we unpack the strategies behind high-performing engineering teams. I'm your host, Katerina, and today I have the pleasure of welcoming Egil Osthus, CEO at Unleash. In this episode, we talk about modernizing release processes in complex enterprise environments. Egil shares how he led a major transformation from slow yearly releases to a fast, safe, and continuous delivery model. We break down the mindset shift required to make that kind of change stick, the tooling that helped along the way, and the cultural shifts that followed. Stay tuned and don't forget to subscribe for more insights into creating high-performing teams and standout products. This episode is brought to you by Adiva, a global network of top developers connecting businesses with world-class talent. Whether you need to scale your team or bring an idea to life, Adiva empowers you to increase your engineering capacity without the overhead of traditional hiring. Visit adiva.it to learn more. Egil, welcome. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Let's start with a bit of an introduction. Can you tell us about your role and your journey leading up to it?
Sure. So today I'm the CEO and co-founder of a company behind Unleash. So Unleash is the largest feature management tool in the world. And leading up to this role, I would say maybe going back, I've always been passionate about computers. So it started the typical hacking the computers of my parents, started to do some software development, moved into college, did a computer science degree, started to do some software development as a professional, and honestly understanding that I'm okay, but I'm not great. So I was fortunate to meet a lot of really strong developers. Working in a corp, it was a video conferencing company that was acquired by Cisco. I saw more of my talent being in leadership versus in doing the hands-on coding myself. Started to move into project management, team management, and the last, I would say 5-6 years prior to starting this company, I was having multiple roles, SVP type of technical product roles in software delivery. And this opportunity to be part of building Unleash for developers came along, and it was a perfect match. My co-founder is the creator and developer and on the team, and I myself is more of the business leader. So together we were saying, let's do this together. And now we are almost 6 years later into building this company. So that's a very short background of how I ended up here.
Nice. And before Unleash, you led engineering at a large enterprise. We know how the release processes tend to be like in large enterprises, but I'm curious to hear your experience. What did the release process look like? Was there something there that inspired you to create Unleash?
I think there is. So it's true. I was working at a large corporate. For European listeners, Visma is one of the major SaaS businesses in Europe. I think altogether there is 6,000-7,000 developers working for Visma in various business companies. So it's a ton of business units. So the type of corporation, this was many different ways of releasing software. I remember the organization I was setting up, that was a 500 developer organization in Netherlands, which was super interesting because I think we will talk quite a bit of how do we release software and all the frictions that is coming along with that. I actually had some frictions with my customers. So this was an ongoing transformation from very modern, a waterfall type of quarterly half-year releases into release at any time type of mindsets. I had full support from my executive management. I had full support from business leaders in the company. My customer were coming back saying, oh, I'm hearing that you guys want to do a release, whatever. Listen, that is not going to happen because in my contract with you guys, I have a 3 months approval cycle before you can change anything. So just stop doing that and continue to do that always. So it was a bit of an accelerated type of the story, but that was sort of the gist of it. So that was one piece. And obviously also, I think we will come back to that. You have any flavor of, going to production is a big friction and concern for every company. So it's a big thing, even though it shouldn't.
But at the end, you managed to lead the transition from the yearly releases or 3 months, depending on the period, to deploy whenever model, right?
Correct. So that's where we ended up coming, and that's a long journey to get there. That is, but it's great when you actually seem that you are able to do.
Yeah, and it's a huge change of mindset to tell us about the journey. What were the steps that you took to achieve this, and also the challenges?
So the interesting part of this, or my story, is that I've done it a few times, and I think every time is a bit different. So maybe I can and talk to this in the sense about general terms, but take some examples of different parts of the organization. First and foremost, it's, I think the biggest challenge you are facing as a CTO or as a VP of engineering is this friction of, I need to do something. You are my counterparts, and you are probably maybe not as informed, or you find it really difficult to understand, because what we do in engineering is quite complicated. And in software engineering in particular, is very abstract. So it's hard to really understand what is happening. So I think the first step is really, I would say, stakeholder management, sitting down with your peers and really understand their concern when and if you are meeting or facing any challenge. Sometimes you're facing less challenge, but it's still good to understand. As a product manager, if the product manager is not part of engineering, my personal point of view is that it should be part of engineering. Sometimes it's not. Understand what is on their mind. What are their concerns? What are they really looking to do? When it comes to sales, what is on their mind? And so on. So that is the first understanding. Understand the common ground. And also when you're pushing for this, because make sure that when you push for this, you are addressing something that there's needed for the organization. If I'm coming and saying, hey, I want to go and release whenever, and not share any context of that, it's like, okay, why do you want to do that? Because I just need to get more shit done, and you want to do a ton of work that is, I don't know. So sometimes the concern is we have so faulty releases. So when we release something, we spend 2 weeks cleaning up that release. Why do you want to release more often? You should start doing more testing up front. Or I remember one of the companies, they were the biggest sitting down with the product management was, and then the product management was not part of engineering. So there was a clear separation, software development separate from business and product management. And the product management was saying, you guys we are so much behind. There's so much we need to do. We are so late to the market. We need to just push more features out. So we don't have time to do what you talk about, because that is time that is not spent building what I need to do in the market. And of course, when you start having that level of understanding, you can also start saying, what is the benefit? Why is this important for you? If there is a lot of incidents, issues, post-release fixes that need to be pushed, it makes sense to say it's because we are making so many changes. And when that changes is setting production, it's really complicated, and that there's so many areas where it can go wrong, versus if we are chopping up in smaller pieces, it's simpler. Or if there is this concern of we are behind, we need to push out, who hasn't really faced that? You need to push more quicker. Also saying that actually, if we are taking this small investment now, we can actually start doing that more often. And even better, we and you as a product manager, we can have a conversation with the real users to get the feedback if this works or not, because then we can start looking, do we deliver something that really matters to the end user? Or is this something that is something we think matters? Because what matters and what we think matters is two different things usually. And so I think as a CTO or aspiring as a CTO or a VP type of in engineering leadership, really having this understanding of the needs of your counterparts, your stakeholders, is like, if you cannot understand that and break into that, you're going to have a lot of challenges. And when you start having those, you need to also to explain what is all of this black box stuff that we do in engineering, how is that benefiting you? And from there, it's of course making sure that you overshare the good stories. Don't make it too big. Don't make it too complicated. I think some of the mistakes I've seen in quite a few of our organizations is we need to do it all. We need to do all or nothing, right? We need to take this big change. We need to do all of the automation, all of the microservices, all of the kind of Jenkins or whatever, and all of this kind of introduction. And it just takes 6 months plus, and you're getting delayed. So it's got to take 9 months, and everybody's so upset. So to break it down into sort of smaller pieces makes a ton of difference. And I see also another key part there, at least that what helped me a lot, was making sure that there was only one backlog of items that we were discussing among my peers. So obviously I had this responsibility of what we prioritized by the end of the day. That was my role. But obviously I had prioritization meetings, what is important for sales, what is important for you guys, and also having that list also with them less, let's say, call it below the hood, the technical items, the roadblockers that is needed for going into a release at any time. Part of that conversation, you can start to say, let's invest quite a bit in the product that you need to do, the features. But I also need to do this 2, 3, 4 items to get me a bit better on how more efficiently I'm shipping my software, because then it's not hidden work. And that's some of the concerns I'm seeing, in particular if there is organization where the communication or trust is not really there is a bit of a mistrust. You start to see, we call it dark work or hidden work, meaning engineering do something we don't talk about because we can, right? Really, it's really hard to understand. The impact, of course, is that everything gets delayed because I'm doing other stuff. So bring it up and be very transparent about that. I think that is some of my key learnings.
And how did you arrange it in practice? Like these small things that engineering had to work on to enable releasing any time, were they part of their day-to-day feature work? Like did they dedicate a specific amount of time daily? Or did you have a separate team focused on this?
We had I think a bit of both. I think where my organization back in the time in Visma, we were very much moving towards a DevOps, meaning the developer is also responsible for operations, and you do them both. We did have some teams where we had more kind of an SRE, dedicated SRE part of the team, or infra engineer part of the team. But we also had teams where that was our shared responsibility. So I think there is multiple ways to make it happen. So again, it was part of this roadmap prioritization. So depending on if you were prioritizing for a month, for a quarter, or whatever, I think depends a bit on where you are. Both can work. I think the core takeaway is make it transparent, make it not a surprise, saying this is important and this is important for this reason. And also sometimes you just need to use your authority to say we need to make this happen. And I think I'm not sure if I have a clear conclusion. Do you want to have dedicated resources or do you want to have shared responsibility? I think it's both can work. It depends a bit on the complexity of your system and the size of the organization and so forth. But I would say one thing is that one of the things that we did have was I spent quite a bit of time really thinking through how I wanted the end game to be, meaning this is my to-be state. This is the nirvana of how we release software. And maybe it feels like, why do you want to create a plan or a nirvana for something that you need to take the learning, you need to adapt, you need to do all of that. But yes, I fully agree to that, but still, you need to have a pretty clear picture of the steps of where you want to go and the steps to get there. And if you don't understand where to go, it's really hard to say what are the steps to get there. And as soon as you start identifying those steps, you can take one piece by the other. I remember we had one team where it was really hard to go to production because we wanted to, or there was a need to go to smaller microservices. And that was like identified before we started to ship to production at any time. And then saying, okay, let's focus maybe this amount of time on this part of the application to carve out that and make that into a microservices architecture. And that allows us to go there. It's a small step. You kept going. And the interesting part also when you start having those small wins is that you get engineering in that team very engaged, right? And if you also start seeing some of those successes that you're looking for, and of course you need to make sure you are a bit smart on making sure you do something that creates success early. You also start getting the business side of things or the other parts of the organization to be really helpful, because what they're seeing is you are addressing their concern and you are on the way to make it a bit better. And I think everybody is very appreciated of or have a ton of understanding that we cannot fix everything immediately. But if there is a team that is actually moving in this right direction, I'm feeling, seeing, hearing that we are taking one step every week or every day, every month, that is a bit better. And that is also the part of leading this transformation, to always remind people that last quarter we did this number of releases, this quarter we are seeing this, which leads to this is the post-release fixes we are doing now versus now. And for our company, we are doing feature management. We were having a conversation with a customer of ours, and they were having exactly this challenge, that they were spending a ton of time in post-release fixes. And after started going through this journey and applying also some improvements there, they were able to tell that actually we are spending 75% less time now, the 2 weeks after release, fixing issues. And of course, everybody understands that this is more engaging for a product. The product is moving quicker because you're not spending time fixing stuff, you're building new stuff, and the engineering team is like more engaged, more energized. So that was also a really good success story for them to tell. And of course, that is sort of the flywheel of change that you want to see. Everybody sort of seeing those small steps are moving everybody in the same direction.
How did the timeline look like? At first, you had very strict release process every quarter, you said, or even longer?
How long does it take to move there? It will always depends, right? It depends on where you are. One organization we probably spent 18 months. Another organization we got quite far in 12. I've seen others coming really a long way in just 2 quarters, 6 months. I've also seen organizations where it's two years later, they're still struggling, not really getting anywhere. So it really depends. It's not like there is one, but you can get a lot of work done in a quarter, and you can get a ton of work done in 2. So 6 months, you can get a pretty head start. But then again, if you are looking at a massive old legacy application and with a ton of technical depth, of course, that also comes into account.
Yeah. Looking at the concrete, like the last company, for example, you worked at first the releases were fixed, right? Every certain period. And then you started working on this in the background.
Yeah.
Did you start doing incremental releases, like at some pieces of the application, maybe after the initial 3 to 6 months, or did you continue working on this for the whole year and then start?
Yeah, it was a bit of mix of all of them actually, because this organization, it was a 500 developers size organization, which means we were responsible for 3 massive applications. And those massive applications were built out of, I think it was 3 portfolio of products. And the portfolio was consistent of more or less independent products in itself. And at the same time, we were also having a new product that was up and coming. So in that context, what I was doing, I was obviously the new product that was building, and from ground up, they were starting with release at any time. So that was the front runner saying this is capable. This is that was my, let's call it the
proof of concept.
Proof of concept, maybe that's a good word. And on the larger applications, we were sitting down and we were looking at, okay, I think we had one of the portfolio had a mobile app, in particular on the Android. And I think probably also the iPhone were working with kind of a backend service that was more independent of the rest of the monolith. So that was also a team that we could push quite quickly into. And this was also, I'm not sure if every listener here is familiar with Visma, it's a payroll accounting system. So it's quite a lot of legislations you need to be compliant with as well. So that also made it a bit difficult, because one thing is to get the transformation done, but also you need to be in tandem with the compliance at the same time. So we were not looking at the core of the payroll and accounting engine, but more on the outskirts of everything. And it was basically a ton of work before we started this project, just talking with the teams, understanding where are there more independent modules where we can source it out, saying, let's go with this, let's keep this for now. And then we started to build up this pretty big plan and also we were able to monitor every team, every part of their project. We used a kind of a DevOps maturity model where we were saying, these are the steps we are going through. And in order to go through all of these steps, you need to have test automation, you need to have integration capabilities, CI/CD pipelines in place. We also need to apply security testing, and that's also something we want to do with automatic. So maybe, and all of those steps had a very kind of specific sort of saying for, let's use a very simple example. To include automatic testing, we need to have API testing in place that needs to have a certain test coverage. We need to have more UI assisted type of test tools that was available at the time. We need to have maybe, I don't know, a test-driven development process, part of how we build the software. So every kind of internal API needs to be tested as well. And that was something we can also monitor, and we could get reports. So I had pretty good reports on this, on the progress for every team, for every model along the way. So that was, of course, the beauty of working in a large organization, that you had this type of support. So I've seen that there is also this type of maturity models available out on different, we can type and search for it. There are some pretty good ones. I think Adidas actually have a pretty good one, if I'm not mistaken. And then you can start mapping the different tools on, also supporting the team, saying, okay, you need to focus, let's focus here first and then move on later. And of course, I wasn't the one that was doing all of this work. I was just making sure that setting the direction, getting the team to make this priority and happen, and making sure that the stories were shared in the organization, that this was happening. It's a ton of work, but it's a lot of joy.
In the end, when you see the result, I guess it all pays off.
Exactly.
You mentioned some of the objections that you got from the stakeholders, the leadership. One was, I think, the difficult release process that they had at the moment, and the post-release fixes and everything. Then there was the feature pressure. We need to ship more, not focus on background stuff. What else is common to hear from stakeholders, and what are some good ways to handle this? You had the opportunity to start with a clean project, show them the result and everything. What if you don't have that? How would you approach the same situation?
Yeah. I also had the opportunity to work with a team that didn't have that possibility to start with a clean project. So again, it comes, I would say the core here is communication. It starts with being very clear of why are you doing this, what is reason behind it. And obviously there is in the stakeholder management, if you start reading a bit, you need to understand who is your day-to-day blockers, and also where you need to seek an approval from that is more not necessarily engaging in this in a daily basis. Meaning, so I remember one situation, one company or this business unit where we had a product manager. He was all against. He was really a blocker of this type of change. He was a bit of a difficult guy to work with, like really opinionated, really a lonely, I wouldn't say lonely star, but he was a star that was going his own way, and he was really not super cooperative with his peers or with the rest of the company. So how do we go by that? Number one, you need to spend time and building trust. Human beings trust people they know. But also you need to make sure, who is he listening to? Meaning, who is he complaining to or getting? So I spent a ton of time also with his manager, sort of building relationship there, saying, this is why we're doing this. I know that this is going to be a problem, or this is a risk for a challenge. We are aware of that. Just trust me that when we experience that, we already are aware that this can happen, and we already have plans in place in order to address those as quickly as possible, to not have impact for yourself and the team. And also understand for both of the manager and this guy, what is important to them, because he was really a blocker, but he was really passionate about his customers. He was talking to customers every day. And he was also a product manager responsible for a product that ended up over years before I was asked to join here, with a lot of technical debt that was never taken care of. So there was a lot of small and stupid issues in the product. So it felt really unstable. So of course, and again, he was feeling that all of the competitors in the market was running very quickly. So he was really scared that this product that was his identity with the customers that he had built so strong relations to, he was seeing this product having more and more incidents, and also not moving forward as quickly as he wanted it to be. So of course, listening to that and also addressing, okay, let's face those incidents, let's get those out of the door, let's take them one by one. So we actually spent quite a bit of time cleaning up. And that was, of course, to build a trust and get into a more stable situation in that case. And as soon as he started to see that we were actually addressing this, also sitting in with him in customer conversations, facing them with their complaints and concerns, and not hiding in any way, that I think gave a lot of trust. And of course, the next step was saying, okay, and his perception of the world was, we are only doing quarterly releases. I think it was half-year releases. So I need to get as much as possible in, because it's going to be 6 months till out next time to see something in production. And of course, that is really difficult because how can you know what you're planning for 6 months from now? Is that is really going to benefit the end users or not? So and that was really a smart trick. And it was one of my direct reports that came up with this. He was saying, this guy has so much objection for us doing this change. So let's not call it a change. Let's call it an experiment, because an experiment is something that is a short lasting thing you do. It doesn't matter if it doesn't work. And it sounds less, you're not obligated to continue. So we also started to change into not talking about a change, but talking about an experiment. So their product manager, we are doing an experiment now for 2 months. Let's try to do very smart iterations, put them in front of customers and get some feedback and see how that works. And I want you to be part of that. I want me to be part of that. Let's do this together. And he bought into that, and he ended up being super supportive after some time that he started to see. And I remember in one meeting, he was saying, actually, we were discussing some features. It was released. It was, I think, maybe 40% done of the entire scope. And the guy was coming back saying, actually, I think this is enough because the customer is now saying it's solved the problem. Let's move on to something else. And that was like a big victory for me.
Compared to the 6-month releases, huge win.
Exactly. Yeah.
After all of this, you started working on Unleash, which is a feature flag management software. And was any of it born during the process? Did you start creating it for the purpose of enabling these quick releases, or was it truly inspired by it? And in general, like, what role did tooling play in all of this? What types of tools maybe you can share?
So toolings were definitely part of this. I would say where I spent most of my time were, as I mentioned quite a bit now, communication, stakeholder management. But obviously, by the end of the day, you're not getting tools is part of the mix, right? No, I don't remember in detail what type of tooling, but it was definitely a lot of off-the-shelf tooling. We try to not build too much of this tooling ourselves. I think today there is a ton of really strong developer tooling that supports you really to what you need. We did build some reporting on top, obviously, that was more custom made for the processes that we wanted to adapt to. But that was more on the reporting side. I would say for all of the kind of the pipeline itself, the tool stack was more or less all. I think all of them were off the shelf, and it would be those you would expect to see. Some of them coming from public cloud vendors, some of them coming more kind of independent vendors. But the tool stack was pretty. It was not like, I think the tooling is available, and it's more of how do you get it into play.
Okay. You mentioned talking to customers together with the leadership in the companies. That is one of the big issues that enterprises face with, like the feedback loop, the inability to understand what customers need, and paired with the long release cycles, it only creates more friction because you understand less, but then you work on something you think they need, and then when it's released, it might just not be what they expected. How did you fix that?
No, that is absolutely right. And I think that is also where you start seeing tooling such as we deliver as part of the mixes makes a ton of sense, because basically what you want to do, exactly to your point, is you want to get something in front of your end users to get the feedback, because the feedback is super important. So a feature management capability that is on top of the CI/CD pipeline makes a ton of sense. And basically what that allows you to do is basically separate what goes into the core of the product or kind of the software itself from when and what you expose to your end users, meaning what are you releasing. So the go to production is separate from to end users. And so some of the key stuff we were doing was also moving away from a lot of feature branches that usually takes a ton of time, and instead use our feature management like Unleash for really saying, this is a new feature. I'm not going to use, nobody's going to see that yet, but I need to start implementing this for myself. And also as a developer, I can start testing this in a production environment for myself and my team and some of my kind of peers. And that's the first step, because then you start to know, number one, it actually works in production. There is no issue, like there's probably issues, but it's the move from a pre-production to a production environment usually is a big of risk. And the big risk usually is how the data is structured, because data is seldom the same. And then when you start having that capability, you can also start working with kind of closer end customers. So one of the things we were doing was I can't remember the name, but basically think of it as all the adapters, like a beta program, where you have a handful of customers they are engaged, they're super supportive of the product, they love the company, and they're highly engaged. Also, they feel that they are important if they're allowed to talk to the development team to impact the change direction of the product. So we were actively using this capability with, I'm tempted to say all of the development teams, and it's probably not true, but most of the development teams had weekly or bi-weekly meetings where they was saying, okay, I'm not going to turn on a new feature for you. Can you see how this works? Can I leave it on for you for another week or so? And we can meet again and you can give me feedback of, does it work? Does it don't work? We also used Slack together with kind of created Slack rooms together with customers where the kind of super users were invited in directly with the developer team. So they could say, oh, I have this new feature enabled. It gives me this error. And can somebody look into this? And then you could see that you could immediately have it kind of fixed quite quickly, which of course drives more engagement on the customer side, but also for the developers. Most of them is developers really care a ton of what they do, and they care even more to get the feedback from end users that they are building for. So I think that by using the feature management capabilities in a way where you can get your end users to start testing, start seeing it, start getting into this, it gives you just a whole new level of how to build software smarter with less stress and all of that. And also, if you think about it, it also creates less stress because you know that you can test it on maybe 10 named customers. If they have issues, they will call you and you can fix it immediately. So it's less of a risk per se. And when you start making it available to more customers, you already know that it works at least for maybe that's 10% of your population, maybe that's 1% of the population, I don't know. But at least you know that it's more likely to work. And also at the end of that, the rollout strategy that we were applying to was after you had the early adapters testing it, do a gradual rollout where you're saying, okay, let's run it to 10% of the users. Let's just stay on for a week, make some observation, monitor, does it work? Does it seem to work? Does it really, and so forth. And then you can go to 25, 50, 75, and you get it drilled. So the impact of issues is reduced and it's getting quicker because it hits production earlier. And I think it's just how everybody should work with software these days. And there is no reason not to.
If you were to sum up what enterprise teams get wrong about modern release strategies, their understanding of the risk involved with faster releases versus what actually happens, what are the things that you would outline?
I think I talked to a lot of enterprise developers through Unleash. I think it's fair to say that most developers are educated and know this is the way. So I think the biggest risk or mistake I see happen quite often is the transition is made. I think it's two things. It's either made too big, so it's getting a really big project. It takes a ton of time, a lot of investment, and it's really hard to get done. So the size, you need to really make it in small iterations and look at also how you do this. And from process and organization point of view, you need to do that in smaller pieces, iterations, make an MVP, make it better, improve it, and so forth. The second piece is also, I think, to not spend enough time in stakeholder management, meaning if you as an engineering leader is saying, this is the way, this is how I want it to be, and you speak in engineering language, you are most likely losing your CEO, your CFO, your sales leader, your sales account executives, maybe even your customer success managers, your directorship on all of these functions, because you cannot assume that everybody understands and knows this as well as yourself. So I think it's the beauty, but also the challenge being an engineering leader is that you need to understand your trade really good, obviously, but you also need to understand the pairs that you're working with and how to what is in it for them, because everybody's selling, and if I'm selling you my product, you don't care, but if I'm helping you take away some of your problems, you're probably very engaged in listening to what I'm saying. It's particularly if you trusted what I'm saying is going to help you. And I think that is a mindset that is super important. And I see that quite often in engineering, you are so trained and you are so smart in what you do, but you don't relate this into how you can help your peers. And then you end up with two different type of silos that doesn't really talk to each other or don't understand each other. And if you don't understand each other, there is less trust. And if there is less trust, there is a big problem to get stuff done.
To wrap things up, what would be one piece of advice that you'd like to give engineering leaders, especially ones trying to optimize their delivery processes?
I would say the one go-to is obviously feature management is a super easy way, because what it allows, you can gain a lot of extra benefit if you are already super optimized and CDIs, everything is automated and you have full DevOps. That's great. But even if you don't, you can start applying feature management, feature toggles, feature flags, whatever you want to call it, and start getting some early wins with very low investment. So you can start doing a ton of what we were talking about very early. And that gives you the foundation to start talking to your stakeholders and doing all of that easy wins, early wins, sort of celebration as build up this. Everybody want to be part of the winning team. Everybody want to be part of somebody that is successful. So that's your responsibility. That's your trick to how do you make some small, easy wins that feels really magical.
That's amazing. Thank you, Egil. It was great chatting with you today. A lot of amazing insights.
Cool. Thanks for having me.
CTO Insights is brought to you by Adeva. To learn more about how we support innovative tech teams, visit adeva.it. Don't forget to subscribe to CTO Insights on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Substack, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for tuning in.